And we are back.
Hello again, it's the Horror Guys.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And we have
Some horror
movies.
Yeah. Imagine, so someday we're going to shock people and talk about comedies or something. But, for today,
the four
it's
romance
horror
movies that we'll talk about this week.
It's horror again.
Yeah, we got some imports, some indies, and some subtitles even.
Yeah, we got it all.
All right, episode 126. This week we will be watching
Superdeep from 2020.
We will.
A Russian horror movie.
Yeah, one of the newer Russian horror movies.
And
then we're going to watch the first.
The first Russian horror movie.
Soviet classic called VI. V-I-Y.
1967. And this would have been all communisty, back when it was, really USSR.
I think the reason this was probably allowed is because it was clearly pre-communist in story. There was no political.
It was historical. Yeah.
A bunch of old Orthodox monk-type people.
Yeah.
Then we'll watch a real classic, the very first, very original, #1 Godzilla from 1954.
It had to start somewhere, and it did.
Yeah, it did. And it started in the ocean.
And then we got
Japan.
A very interesting indie, Miranda Veil.
Miranda Veil sounds like someone's name.
It was a full-length movie. I misspoke when I said short.
But, not a short. Actually, fairly long.
Yeah, or a 44-minute runtime according to IMDb. Yeah.
I think it's available on, I want to say Prime.
Somewhere.
Yeah. It's out there.
It's out there.
It's out there for streaming.
Yes.
But first, let's start with... You ready, comrade?
I am ready. Let's go deep.
Via.
Oh, we're not going super deep first. Okay,
No,
we should go.
We got the old one first. 1967's
Okay.
V.
It was a different time and a different land.
It was.
Yeah, I think that's part of what made this so interesting.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen like old Japanese stuff with samurai and old European stuff with the knights and old American, cowboy and Indian movies. But
This was
don't
old
see
Russian.
much from old Russia. This was a cool one. All right, directed by, here we go, Konstantin Urshov and Georgy Krupatchev. Written by Konstantin Urshov and Nikolai Gogol. Heard of him. Stars Leonid Karavyalov, Natalia Varley, and Alexei Glazerin. Hour and 16 minutes.
Well done on those names.
This was in color, too, wasn't it?
It was?
It was, yes. All right. Did you like it?
Yeah, overall, I kind of liked it.
It has issues.
Yeah, that's why I say I kind of liked it.
It was.
I didn't love it.
I don't regret watching it. I thought it was interesting.
Yes.
Do
I was at no point
recommend it?
bored, but would I recommend it? That's a good question.
Well, that's
From if you're interested in the history of horror films, and if you're interested in what things were like in Russia, a taste, a little taste sample of old Russia,
caviar and vodka.
Yeah. Well, I don't think
A lot of vodka in that movie.
I don't think there was caviar. They had a
No,
lot of
no.
vodka, a
Yeah.
lot of drinking in that movie.
Lots of pigs and chickens, I think, in this one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, once upon a time in Russia, the Cyrillic credits roll as a voiceover briefly tells us that Vey is a popular legend. So it's their version of Snow White. Not really.
Well, more or less. Yeah.
Something like that.
An equivalent. Yeah.
A crowd of young monks settle down as a senior priest blesses them and sends them on their way for spring break. Who knew monk school had spring break?
And what a bunch of hellions these kids are.
They aren't kids.
Well, they're young men, but boy, he sets them loose and they just tear through the village, and
These are like old teenagers, young 20-somethings learning to be monks.
Grabbing the
like
women,
grabbing
grabbing the food, harassing the village, and, on the way out of town.
Lock up your pigs and your daughters. The monks are on spring break. And I wonder what they were doing with the pigs and the daughters.
You don't want to
Probably
know.
the same
you
thing.
You don't want to know.
All right, well, they steal from the market and grab girls on their way out of town. We follow a trio as they all head off in their own directions home, but they get lost. They don't stay on the road or out of the moors. Kalyava, Koma, and Gorobets are the three monks. Just when they think they're going to have to sleep under the stars, they spot a fenced-in farm. An old lady reluctantly lets them in, saying there's no food, and splits them up to sleep in different places. 2 go in the barn and 1 in the house. The old woman mounts one of the guy's shoulders and rides him around the farm and up into the air for flying.
She's a witch.
She is a witch. But yeah, hops up on his shoulders and he starts walking. He starts walking faster. Before you notice, he's speeding down. You see the trees flying by and then up in the air. She's riding him like he was the broom.
And the effects and stuff were kind of clever, how they did things. I mean, primitive.
It's not going to pass anybody. It's not going to
fool anybody. No. But it was kind of
it was well done,
storybookish, fairy tale-ish.
Very much.
The way they did it. Yeah.
All right. Upon landing, he beats her until she says she's dying, and she reverts to her true, beautiful form of a young woman. So I guess she's young and pretty. She just looks like an old witch when she's got her witch powers, which is kind of weird.
Seems backwards.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Coma runs away in panic and ends up back at the school in town that he just left. The head priest says that the daughter of one of the rich landowners whose estate is outside of town is dying, and with her last strength, begged for her last rites to be given by Coma. So Coma is put on a wagon, heading out with a wagon load of misfits to the estate. This is a wagon load of weird-looking guys.
And they like their drinking.
Oh, yeah, well, Russian.
Yeah. And they're there to keep Coma on track.
Yeah,
keep him on the job.
They're kind of escorts.
Yes.
They stop at an inn for a bite to eat and a whole lot to drink. They hit the road again, drunk and singing. Sadly, the young woman dies before they get there. There's a touch of comedy throughout as Coma keeps trying to get away and his companions keep stopping him. In the somber light of morning, Coma enters the chapel where the woman is laying in state with her father.
And who's the woman?
You know.
Uh-huh.
He's shocked to see that it's the girl who was the old woman that he beat almost to death. Coma denies he knows anything, but the father says her last words were to send for Coma to pray over her for 3 nights. Coma says he's not worthy. He even slept with a butcher's wife during Lent. But the father insists that he do it, or else. Well, there's a funeral service with wailing and singing villagers as they move her coffin out of the house and into the chapel. Then his traveling companions bid him good luck as he's locked in the chapel with her for the first night to pray over her. He lights all the candles, says some prayers, snorts a little snuff, and sneezes loud enough to wake the dead.
And it does.
She rises blindly, stumbling around, homing in on his voice, but is kept out by a magic circle that he drew around himself. Coma prays like he means it now. There's a nice little bit of mime work from the actress who is kept out from the invisible barrier of his circle. With the crowing of the rooster signaling daybreak, she collapses back into her coffin. 1 night done. Well, over breakfast, his 6 companions ask how it went. Noises, nothing, Coma replies.
Yeah, he doesn't admit
he covers
any
it
of
up,
it.
yeah. Day passes with folk singing and drinking, and he sets off on night 2 very drunk, starting right off with a protective circle this time. A Cossack is afraid of nothing, because there's nothing to be afraid of, he says. This time the whole coffin and girl levitates, trying to batter her way through the magic barrier, which is a pretty cool effect. The whole coffin is swinging against this invisible nothing, like a battering ram.
Yeah. Doesn't get through, though.
Well, another night ends, and she rests again. With day, Coma wants to dance somewhere between delirium and joy at being alive. He takes off his hat to reveal his hair has turned white overnight. He tries telling the father that she's bewitched and he can't go on, but Dad's not having it. Pray over her, he commands, or get a lashing. If he does, he'll get 1,000 gold pieces. Coma mulls it around a bit, then runs away, but he doesn't get far before his companions bring him back. On to the 3rd night. Coma prays fervently as she rises again. She curses him as he prays. Hands come out of the walls and reach for him. Skeletons and creatures close in. Then she summons V, the biggest and baddest monster. The circle fails, and the creatures swamp him. They're driven back by morning, but it's too late. The young woman reverts back to the old witch as she collapses back into the coffin this time and Coma lays prone on the ground. His two young friends from the beginning talk about poor Coma, God rest his soul. If he only hadn't been afraid, the witch couldn't have got him. Or maybe, one of them speculates, maybe he isn't really dead at all.
Maybe he's not. Now he's the stuff of legend.
Well, I liked it more than I thought I would. It's a super, super, super slow burn film, with the first 10 minutes being really good, and the last 10 minutes being really good, with the slow burn center.
Yeah, I think that pretty much is it, yeah.
This was the first horror film.
Yeah.
First horror film produced in Soviet Russia, and it's all about doing your duty and not being afraid of anything. Yes, it's based on a folktale, but it's no Snow White. It's a sort of a vampire story, but it's really more about witchcraft and the real witches of legend, not the usual Wicked Witch of the West kind. It's entertaining primarily due to its Russianness. We don't get many Russian horror films. The ones we do get are great because, well, Russians kind of know horror. The costumes and effect at the end are really good considering that this is from the 1960s. And they're clearly superior to most of the things from Hammer or the Corman films of the era. Those monsters at the end, can you see Vincent Price putting up with that?
No. No, I don't think he would.
No. Christopher Lee, he'd be running in terror. Okay, so it's all very low budget, but it really works and holds up fairly well, even considering their budget. Oddly enough, the hero dies at the end, which is, of course, about as Russian of an ending as you could possibly expect.
Drama.
Yeah. And then Kevin made a note.
Oh, I did. Okay. It was a very different culture in another country, in another time. As Brian put it well, the foreignness of it was entertaining and interesting, but it was a really slow-moving piece. Yeah, it seems more like a folk tale than horror, with the scares being pretty low-key. There are some pretty good special effects, and the finale of her menagerie of creatures was creepy.
Yeah, I really liked the ending. The last 10 minutes paid off, I thought.
Yeah.
All right.
Well
so
worth it.
We'll never see another Russian film.
Did you know that the guy who played Coma is still alive? He was born in 1936.
Oh, okay.
He's up there.
Yeah.
84 now? Yeah, 85?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll bet he's a big fan of Superdeep from 2020.
I wonder if he's seen it.
Other Russian film that we watched this week.
A much more modern Russian horror
much
movie.
more modern. From 2020. Directed by Arseny Suyin. Written by Samuel Stewart Hunter and Arseny Suyin. Stars Milena Radulovic, Sergei Ivanyuk, and Nikolai Kovbus. 1 hour, 55 minutes.
And this is one of those that has that nice gray area between science fiction and horror.
It goes both ways.
Yes.
This was color, right?
It was.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. They have color films in Russia. They're allowed to film in color.
Okay, it started out in black and white because there was a flashback.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, okay. Did you like it?
I did. Yeah, I thought it was great.
I did. This is kind of ripping off like 6 or 7 other films.
But they mash them together so smoothly
And they
that
do it well,
you hardly notice. Yeah, it's really well done.
There's The Thing in there, and Alien in there, and The Descent is in there.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of zombie movies are in there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they've taken bits and pieces of lots of things.
Definite hints of various movies, yeah.
Yeah, thumbs up for me. A man in a black and white flashback coughs up blood and dies in the hospital. It was a preliminary test of a vaccine, and it's not going well.
It's not a successful vaccine.
We haven't heard much about Russian COVID vaccines. You think it worked like that? Like
Probably
in
not.
real life?
No, I don't think so.
But she wants to pull the plug on future tests, but her commander says that man would have died for nothing if she quits now. We flash forward to the present, and Anya has been credited with curing the disease. So it worked eventually.
Yep.
We see Mikhail Gorbachev come on TV to give some context about when this takes place. So in the middle of this, Anya gets a call about a mysterious incident at the Superior Hole. There was a strange noise 12,000 feet below the surface in the world's deepest borehole, and then 20 people went missing. It's a secret research lab 12 kilometers beneath the surface of the Earth. There's a report of a previously unknown disease, and they want her to go down there and get a sample of whatever it is.
Because she knows about such things.
Journey to the center of the Earth.
Well, not hardly. 12 kilometers. No.
May as well be.
No.
Well, they land the helicopter at the frozen Arctic base and see an infected man staggering toward the copter.
Oh, and to give this context, this is where the science fiction part definitely. They've got, labs and, things they've tunneled out 12 kilometers deep.
Yeah.
The deepest mine has not reached 4 kilometers. The deepest working mine. I mean, they've done boreholes and, experimental things that are somewhat deeper, but this is, the science fiction aspect.
The secret Russian tunnels down there.
There's no labs,
okay,
at least that we know of, that are 12 kilometers deep. Yeah. They haven't done that.
Well, anyway, they get to the Arctic base, and there's a zombie-looking guy who staggers toward the copter. The man has a grenade, and he blows himself up. Anya hurries outside to get a blood sample from whatever's left, and one of the survivors from down below says, "They're lying. It's not a disease. Go back to your family while you still have time. It's hell down there. That's what they found." Ooh. Sounds very Event Horizon.
Well, and there's an urban legend, too, or a conspiracy or whatever, that Russia really did that they bored all the way down so deep that they did tunnel into hell, and, they could hear the screams of the damned coming up So this is based on an actual urban legend, conspiracy thing.
Well, that's just cool.
They did tunnel down the deepest hole in the world, and there were the screams of the damned. And they capped it quickly again.
I believe that.
Because
I totally believe that.
They tapped into hell.
Well, they get in the big elevator and strap in. It's like Willy Wonka with the strapping in and super speed.
Yeah.
The reverse brakes break, and they're soon in free fall. Then they all pass out. Uh-oh, it looks like this is a trick by the head scientist to knock everyone out and steal the suitcase with the samples and the key card for the elevator.
Oops.
They're at 5,220 meters down. There's a second lab down at the bottom, but they can't get there without that key card. The door is welded shut, so we're down in this maze underground and we need to find a key card. It sounds like half the video games I played in the
You're on a
90s.
quest.
Yeah.
You're on a quest, yeah.
Well, the door is
and
welded shut.
And it's dark and shadowy, and there's monsters.
Oh, yeah,
and,
there is.
Unknowns,
got Doom going on here.
You have to explore, yeah.
There's writing on the wall that says demons here and insatiable hunger. Also, it's supposed to be 200 degrees at the bottom of the shaft. The door opens and a woman named Olga walks out. She walked all the way up from the lowest level through all that heat. Her back is mutated and rotted looking. They take a sample and see that it's a cellular parasite. Olga starts glowing with an internal heat. Well, you got a temperature, a fever, when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
The head scientist who stole the samples decides to blow up the tunnel, causing damage even on their level thousands of feet above. In an hour, the pressure is going to destroy the whole place. By the time they return to the infirmary, Olga has mutated, and her algae mold infection has literally covered the walls of the hospital room. Anya and her guard are shot rather thoroughly with spores. The base doctor was also infected, and she starts sprouting big spiky bones out of her skin. They get out, Anya puts on a gas mask, but the guard is clearly already infected. And how she's not infected,
she is, just not as badly, so it didn't affect her as fast or as bad. No, it didn't hit her like it hit the other guy.
Yeah, it did shoot him right in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Anya figures out that the parasite hates the cold since it evolved deep below the surface. The colonel wants those samples returned to base so they can use it as a weapon to save the failing Soviet Republic. They want the infected security guard to make it to Moscow. The guard says, "Please make sure no one dies because of me." The soldiers move on into the tunnel, and the civilians remain behind. There was something big down there that they shot at but didn't kill. Some of them make it back, but others return in pieces. "You shouldn't have opened the door. Now it knows where we are," one of the soldiers says. Finally, the elevator comes back up from the lower level. They need to go down to find the scientist with a key card that lets them go back up. They get to the bottom, and it's all frozen, not hot like they expected. The parasite absorbs the heat. They play a recording that explains that this alien thing was stopped millions of years ago by the permafrost, and that now it wants out. Sounds like the Thing.
They tunneled right through the permafrost.
Yeah, they did. It learned how to melt bodies together. Someday, someone is going to come back to this base, and that would be a catastrophe. The Colonel realizes that this Thing can't be released or taken to the surface. He then puts on the defective heat suit and goes out into the 200-degree section after the dead scientist with the key card, but he doesn't make it back. Anya goes out next, completely unprotected, finds the Colonel's body and the key card. She recovers. Anya, however, is not bothered as much by the heat. She must be pretty badly infected already.
Yeah, the parasite is absorbing the heat, which I think probably extended her time, too. I think it appeased the parasite somewhat.
Peter, the scientist who has been hanging back the whole time, shoots the engineer in the leg and demands the key. "This will be my biggest discovery ever," he explains. The 3 remaining survivors return to the middle level. But something big eats or absorbs Peter. It's big, and it's covered in the faces of the people it absorbed. Anya douses herself in cold water so it doesn't see her, and then she has to crawl under the creature. She finds Nikolai, who is not dead yet either, and they get into the elevator just as the creature chases them. They find the guard that was infected, who's mostly mutated in the elevator and ready to release his spores. Anya and Nikolai argue over whether or not to continue to the surface and probably infect the world. The guard uses the last of his humanity to kill Nikolai and let Anya do the right thing. Anya then enters the wrong password into the keypad 3 times, which starts the self-destruct sequence, which every elevator has.
But not fast enough.
Dropping the elevator full speed to the bottom. Except she gets to the surface and medical personnel pull her out before it drops. We know that she's completely infected, and she grabs one of the soldiers' grenade, but we see a soldier come up behind her, and we fade to black. Did she or didn't she?
And even if she did, would it just blow the pieces all over the place?
Yeah, well, this is Russian-made and clearly dubbed, but it's a good dubbing job this time. Still, the main character talks with a heavy Russian accent, and she's a little hard to understand for no particular reason, since she's the only one with a Russian accent. If you're going to dub it, dub it. Don't fake the Russian accents.
You might as well go
or at least give
hog.
everybody one.
Mm-hmm.
The setting is horror film perfection. It's an icy Russian wasteland with a 12-kilometer deep tunnel with 1 elevator shaft. You don't get much more isolated than that anywhere on Earth. It may as well have been set in space. The creature design is a cross between the creature from The Thing from 1980 meets the Absorbaloff from Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm,
a big green guy with the
yes.
faces sticking out.
Uh-huh.
I could see why bullets wouldn't stop this thing due to its size, but it doesn't really look fast enough to chase anybody. I liked it a lot. It also is a slow burn, and there's nothing you haven't seen here before, but it's just foreign enough to be interesting.
It was really good.
Yeah.
Recommend that one highly.
And then I've got a short for you that I saw a while back. This is another one that Kevin didn't get to see.
Yeah, I'm going to sit this one out.
Called Nova, N-O-V-A, from 2019. And I'm amazed that this thing's 3 years old and it's not available to watch on the internet. This is just still going around in the film festival circuit. Written and directed by David Maccabee. Stars Kelly Kula and David Maccabee. 9 minutes. And I'm trying to remember, I don't think it actually has any dialogue. So, a woman walks in the door and collapses. There's a lot of screaming going on outside. She activates her video camera, and she wants to show people that it's not only is it too late, but that humanity can still start over. Okay, it's not too late.
Not too late.
She's obviously sick with something. I raised it from the very beginning, she says. And then she got attached to it. It's proceeding fast, and she knows she doesn't have much time left. And that's pretty much it. The rest of the video is just the plague or whatever it is taking over.
Okay.
So the camera, the story is really nothing. I mean, that was pretty much a nothing story.
But you liked it?
It's all in the special effects. It's a one long camera shot that the camera circles around her repeatedly, And each time the camera circles her, the infection is visibly worse. So it's like this black mold stuff that crawls over her. And every time the camera goes around, you see her face again, it's further off. And her hands are more melty. And
Interesting.
I don't know how they did it, but it was a really neat effect. All in one long take.
Cool.
And then there's the big reveal of what's going on that I didn't spoil. And it's not a good situation. And yeah, it probably is too late for humanity at this point.
Don't.
So, what's big and green and makes a lot of noise?
Godzilla.
Yeah. Actually, he's not green. He's black and white.
Yeah, we don't know he was green. We assume that because he's a lizard.
All right,
Lizardy.
Godzilla, 1954. Directed by Ishiro Honda, written by Takeo Murata, Ishiro Honda, and Shigeru Kayama. Stars Takashi Shimura, Akihiko Hirataka, and Akira Takarada.
Here's where it all began.
Yeah, and I said all that because my typing here has no commas in it, so that all kind of runs together.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So, you have seen all the recent Godzilla movies.
I have.
And, of course, many of the others through the years. What'd you think of this one?
It was okay. I mean, you should see it to see where it all began and how it all began. But I think I think I might have been least entertained of any Godzilla movie I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
I mean, it was interesting, because of the era and, historically, I guess, it's the first one.
It's an important movie.
It's an important movie, I think is the way to put it. Right. Yes, it's not a great movie.
Well, the new Godzilla movies certainly have all the action and big monster stuff down. Mm-hmm. And then we watched that one called Shin Godzilla, which had a lot of the bureaucracy and the politics behind it. And
that
this
one
had
was
a lot
closest to this.
This had a lot of that in there.
The Shin Godzilla, I think, looped back around, and it was like this one, only much better.
Well, yeah, newer and
yeah, newer and better in every way.
Okay,
yeah. I mean, I did not hate it. It was interesting.
It's not as good as the current.
It was
the new
interesting, or even the later black and white ones. I thought where Godzilla's fighting various monsters and doing other things. And
I'll bet if we watched more of those, you change that tune.
Maybe.
I remember those being pretty bad for the most part, but it's been years and years. Well, we start out on a boat full of Japanese sailors. They hear an explosion and see a huge flash underwater that sinks the ship. They get off a radio report before going down. Ogata picks up the phone and hears about the disaster, so he cancels his date with Emiko. Another ship is sent to investigate what happened, and it's quickly sunk too. Could it be a drifting sea mine or a volcanic eruption?
Spoiler, it's not a volcanic eruption.
I'm pretty sure a single drifting sea mine could not blow up two ships.
No.
You only get the one bang with
those.
those.
Yeah, that's how mines work, yeah.
The local fishermen can't catch anything. They think Godzilla may have done it. He's sort of like cursing their catch. But he's just an old legend. Godzilla is said to be a creature that lives in the sea and from time to time comes ashore to eat humans. They used to sacrifice girls to him in the good old days. At the very least, there's probably some kind of animal in the sea that is scaring away all the fish. The villagers perform a kind of exorcism ceremony so they can catch fish again.
You know what I just realized?
What's that?
There's topless nudity in this.
There is?
Yeah, here's a still of the villagers, and there are a couple of women in the background who are topless.
Japan, 54, they didn't have the same censors.
Yeah, and they're in the background. I mean, probably watching it, you probably wouldn't have noticed, but the still, you're like, oh yeah, what? She's not wearing a shirt. There's that one.
Okay, so Godzilla 54 for all your porn needs.
Barely.
Well,
Okay.
Something destroys one of the local fishermen's house. Was it just the storm? After a while, there's an official inquiry, and reports say that 17 houses were destroyed along with lots of livestock. Professor Yamada thinks it's a long-lost creature, and he compares it to the Yeti. Is it a Yeti?
No.
No,
Spoiler, it's not a Yeti.
It never is. Ogata and Emiko...
See, the Godzilla's real, and Yeti's just a myth.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ogata and Emiko board a ship to search for the strange creature. They investigate the ruins of the house and find radiation. It's not widespread fallout, it's just this one village. The professor finds a huge footprint, and it's radioactive as well. Then they hear footsteps, and we finally get a glimpse of the animal. And you know what it is. It's Godzilla. It makes the trademark Godzilla roar and stomps around after the villagers before vanishing into the ocean. And that roar, they must have reused that in all the movies because it sounded identical to what you're used to.
Yeah, it did.
The professor thinks it's a prehistoric creature that lived beneath the sea until experimental nuclear weapons tests drove it to the surface. The radiation proves that a nuclear bomb was involved. Rather than start a panic, they vote to keep their findings secret, but it leaks to the papers anyway. The fleet is called in to drop depth charges. The professor is a zoologist and he doesn't want to kill Godzilla, but that night, Godzilla is spotted by a cruise ship. There's a little bit of a love triangle thing going on between Ogata, Emiko, and Dr. Serizawa. Serizawa is a scientist who shows Emiko his work. It's something that kills fish, apparently. He may be able to use this weapon against Godzilla. Suddenly, Godzilla attacks again. He comes into Tokyo this time and derails a train. They bring in international experts who want to build a huge electric fence all along the coastline.
Did you notice the international experts are also Asian?
They said they were going to bring in the Americans and the Europeans, international people from all over the world.
There wasn't
and there
a
is not
face.
one non-Japanese person in this movie.
That's right, yeah.
Not one.
We have some commentary on that, I think,
Yeah,
later.
I think we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the army fights back the next time Godzilla makes landfall. Godzilla tears right through the giant electric fence and melts the towers with his radioactive breath. He makes mayhem all over Tokyo this time, and cars, trucks, and people are squashed beneath the giant lizard. Godzilla knocks out the transmitting tower, and all the reporters fall to their deaths. Oh, darn, dead reporters. The city burns, and the humans watch helplessly as Godzilla destroys pretty much everything. The Air Force shows up and shoot missiles at it, but that doesn't have much effect. The monster eventually gets bored and heads back to the ocean. We then get a disaster recovery and sad-faced children montage as Emiko decides to tell Ogata about Serizawa's secret project. We get a flashback to see what happened to the fish in his tank. The pellet he dropped in turned all the fish into skeletons.
Quick kill.
Dissolved the skin right off.
Very quick kill.
Emiko then swore not to tell, but this is all just too important to keep the secret. Ogata and Serizawa fight over the experiment, but Serizawa knows that if they use it even once, scientists around the world will want to use it as a weapon. Finally, Serizawa decides to burn all his notes and give Ogata the single oxygen-killing weapon. So somehow or another it eats all the skin off by destroying oxygen.
It's very scientific.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, very scientific. Well, they pinpoint Godzilla's location with a Geiger counter and prepare to use the new weapon against him. Ogata and Serizawa put on diving suits and head to the ocean floor. They pull Ogata back up, but Serizawa stays down on the ocean floor to set off his device at Godzilla's feet. Serizawa then cuts the rope so they can't pull him back up, which seemed completely pointless. Because...
Well, that way the knowledge of that thing would die with him, too, and nobody could force it out of him. And
all right.
Nobody else would ever be able to use that.
Yeah, because dead fish are a problem.
Horrific weapon.
Godzilla comes up for one final roar before sinking to the ocean floor, where he turns to bones and then dissolves. I'm sure we'll never see him again.
Never, ever.
The professor then suggests that it's not likely that Godzilla was the only member of his species, and if we keep doing nuclear testing, another may show up. All right.
Now, if I could just pause there before your commentary. If you go to Godzilla 1954 in IMDb and look at the photos, I would really recommend that. That's very interesting, especially if you've seen the movie. They do models. Godzilla's a guy in a suit. Most of the shots.
No!
Yes, a guy in a rubber suit, yeah. But
Childhood
showing them walking around on the models and the sets and here's one that's an interesting shot where he's just wearing the bottom half of the Godzilla suit. So,
Godzilla foot shot.
Lots of interesting behind the scenes shots and publicity photos that are worth checking out.
Very cool.
IMDb photos, yeah.
Well, it's got a really big cast and a vast number of extras. There's tanks, military transports, and soldiers everywhere, but not an American face in the entire film, which is odd since this was only 13 years after the war. and the permitted Japanese defense force was extremely limited at the time.
Yeah.
After 1945 and the World War II
ended. At all
ended,
in this movie.
Yeah, the Japanese military was completely disbanded, and the Americans were there.
Unconditional surrender, and that was part of the terms.
Yeah, it's partly an occupation, partly a defense.
And this Japan in 1954 has a massive military.
Yeah, it does.
So.
Well, Godzilla's design hasn't really changed much since his first film. The creature is obviously a man in a suit crushing miniatures, but all the elements are there that are still used at the modern Godzilla films. Godzilla's heat breath looks like a fire extinguisher or something else that blows smoke.
I bet it was a fire
Probably
extinguisher.
was.
Yeah.
This is all played very straight, and there's nothing tongue-in-cheek or campy about it. Godzilla's personality has changed a lot in future movies. Eventually, he becomes sort of a guardian hero for Japan.
Yeah, here he just seemed like a wild animal.
He's a big monster, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not even as
sign
intelligent as King Kong.
Yeah, no sign of intelligence or purpose, really, even.
Big lizard.
Yeah.
All right, and speaking of big lizards, there aren't any of those in our next film.
There might be a little lizard. It's a lot of
did
desert
spend a lot
stuff.
of desert
A lot of
time,
desert
yeah.
stuff. I bet there's a lizard or two.
This one is called Miranda Veil from 2020.
You're not going to spoil this one a lot, are you?
Not a lot.
Okay, because it was good.
All right.
I liked it.
Written and directed by Levin Garbish, stars Vita Gaffari, Annabelle Barrett, and Olivia Blue. Hour and 44 minutes. There is a link to watch this on Amazon. It is on Amazon Prime, so yeah, go watch it first.
I'd give this one the best of the four out of the show. In my opinion, this is my favorite of the four today.
Okay.
Superdeep would be second.
I mean, it's hard to argue against something as classic as Godzilla, but it doesn't hold up all that well.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's an important film, like I said, not a good film.
Yeah, this at least gives you things to think about.
Uh-huh.
All right, so Soren has a girl in a shed out in the desert.
Oh, how romantic!
No,
not that kind of girl in the shed.
No,
Okay.
the other kind of girl in the shed.
Oh, okay.
He hears voices in his head telling him to kill her, and he wants to, but he can't do it.
And he hasn't yet.
Not yet.
He hasn't actually done a killing yet.
He wants his first kill to be memorable, and he doesn't think this girl is very special. He knocks her out, dumps her in the desert somewhere alive, and drives away. "Find another one," shouts the voice in his head. Soren then returns to Barstow, California. We cut to a trio of girls getting drunk in the desert. Kaylee and Olivia are Miranda's friends.
Party! Woo!
The next morning, Miranda's parents warn her not to drink too much tonight, and it's her 21st birthday. Soren sits outside her bedroom in his car with the names and photos of all three girls in his book. Miranda runs into Soren on the street that night, and he's still stalking the trio. The following night, he's out there again waiting for her. This time, he injects her with something and shoves her into his car. She wakes up the next morning, chained up in his desert shed. She's not happy, and she tries to talk him into letting her go. He explains what's going to happen, and then starts the torture. He plays with her for several days, and finally gets bored with her. He cuts her throat, and she bleeds out. The voice in Soren's head is finally pleased with him. "I finally killed someone."
The end.
Yeah, no.
No?
Then he turns around, and she's standing there, healthy and without a drop of blood on her. He then tries again by dropping an axe on her head, and she gets up again. She just keeps getting back up. Apparently she doesn't even feel pain. Would appear she cannot be killed.
Well, that's kind of weird.
After a bit of freaking out, the two experiment with her new superpower for a bit. And I'll stop there. Because that's really very early. That's kind of the main plot.
Hilarity ensues. Yeah. Okay, not hilarity. But there's some dark humor in it, certainly.
Yeah, this is a fairly low-budget film. IMDb says it was done for $50,000, which it looks good.
It does, yeah.
It looks
Really
good. It sounds good. The acting is over average for this kind of indie film. And it doesn't really give off an indie film kind of vibe.
No, it
You know,
doesn't.
a lot of these films you can tell by just the video that
It
this
looks
was
like
shot on a phone.
it
or
looks
something.
like an indie film.
Yeah.
A lot of times you say this is an indie. Well, this isn't one of those.
No, this looks like anything else you'd watch on Amazon.
Yeah.
The sets aren't really much to speak of, as a lot of the outdoor shots take place in the desert.
That's probably where it saved a lot of money.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right, so there's some weird characters in this one. The rabbit's story is weird. The fox's wisdom is creepy. And the cat's story is depressing. And I'm going to let you guys watch it, figure out what that even means. Still, the movie does take a little downturn when Soren and Miranda separate toward the end of the film.
Yeah, that was kind of a disappointing point.
Yeah. Once they get back to Barstow, the fun all stops. The final conversation that Miranda has at night in the desert does tie up everything and sort of kind of makes sense, which is good. But the gore is pretty minimal considering how many times somebody dies, and most of the real violence kind of takes place off screen. There's a lot of talking in this film, but it's not really boring, and the characters they run into are just over the top cool.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
I liked this way more than I expected to.
Yes,
it was very
me too.
good.
Yeah, big thumbs up.
So yeah, okay, so Vi from 1967 is sort of a mostly kind of historically Russian thumbs up.
Yeah.
Superdeep, we both liked.
Mm-hmm. Liked
Miranda Veil, we both liked.
Uh-huh.
And Godzilla, we'll say you have to watch it because it's important, but you don't have to like it.
There, that seems fair.
It's like the oatmeal of movies.
I like oatmeal.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's our show for this week. Stop in during the week at horrormovieguys.com for all these reviews. You can read things. We're always ahead on the website than what we get to on the podcast. So you can read stuff we haven't talked about yet. Or if you want to contact us, send us email at horrorguysmail@gmail.com. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/horrormovieguys. Or pick up our books at horrorguys.com/books. You want to see some movies next week, too?
Yeah, I think we should. What are we going to see?
Well, we're going to watch some interesting indie films to start with.
Uh-huh.
We're going to watch a couple of them. Friend of the World, and also one called Rattlers 2, both from 2021.
I understand one is in black and white and one has Mel Novak.
Always need more Mel.
Yes, that's always true.
Yeah, Friend of the World is a black and white indie film. I think it's 50 minutes long. It's fairly short. And Rattlers 2 is a sort of a sequel to a 1970 film called Rattlers. 1976 film called Rattlers. But both of those came out this year, so they're new. We're also going to watch an oldie called Dead of Night from 1945, which is an anthology. And one that doesn't get enough love is
Van Helsing from 2004.
Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing.
As Van Wolverine.
Van Wolverine, yes, Wolverine Helsing. Yeah, he's got Dracula, he's got Frankenstein's monster, he's got werewolves and Igor, and
I actually saw this when it came out.
So did I.
Yeah, we'll be seeing it again.
What'd you think? Did you like it at the time?
I did, yeah.
I did like it at the time, and people just love to rag on it, and we'll find out next week if it holds up.
Does it hold up 16 years later? Yeah.
16 years?
17.
It's hard to believe it's that old.
Yeah, no.
All right, well, I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And we'll see you next week.
See ya.